going to start with the quarterbacks and the people who are widely available. Starting with the guy that threw for almost 500 yards last night with 3 interceptions.
Yeah, Jameis is going to be up there at quarterback. The problem is that the matchup this week is not great against Pittsburgh, but still, you could say the matchup wasn't great last night against Denver, and look what they did. So Jameis is going to be up there. I was still very surprised to see how available Caleb Williams is. He needs to be added. He's been hot ever since they made the change at offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And the Niners, I mean, you think Niners and you think, oh, tough team, tough defense. They're not. They're hurting right now. Russell Wilson coming off of a 400-yard game of his own against the Browns this week at the Big Ketchup Bottle. I like Russell Wilson. If you're really hurting, Will Levis has got the Jags this week, and that's a pretty good matchup. And for those of you who don't need a quarterback this week, Anthony Richardson is still available in around 40% of leagues across Yahoo, ESPN, and Sleeper. They do have a bye, but he's got some good matchups after the bye week, so he's certainly worth looking at.
How are these people? Like, these are big names. How many of these guys are actually available? Like, what kind of percentages are we talking about? I'm looking at my son's league. They're 10.
Yeah.
And the only names that you just mentioned that are actually available here are Will Levis, Bryce Young, who you didn't mention. What about Bryce Young? Why not Bryce? Where does he fall into this? Because he's probably available in some leagues, and he's playing better.
I don't like. He's playing the Eagles this week. I don't really love that, but I mean, if you're looking for somebody to use, I just don't think anyone's going to start Bryce Young in the fantasy playoffs, and it's not a good matchup this week for him against Philly. Caleb Williams, ownership, ESPN 37%, Sleeper 55%, Yahoo 54%, Russell Wilson, ESPN 43.1%, Sleeper 41%, Yahoo 35%. Anthony Richardson, 57% on ESPN, 58% on Sleeper, and 60% on Yahoo. So he's lesser available, but still out there.
Okie dokie.
Yep.
Okie dokie. All right. And you would prioritize them in the order you mentioned them?
Yes. Yep.
You would go
because
Jameis.
Richardson unfortunately has got that bye. So if you need a quarterback this week, he's not going to help you. But in the playoffs, he might. Again, he's got some good matchups.
I feel like, and again, this might be my bias creeping in, but I think I'd rather have Caleb than Jameis.
It's a toss-up, honestly. But look at what Stefanski's doing with that offense. They're throwing the ball a ton. And so, I mean, Jameis, hell, by accident, is going to score a ton of fantasy points, it seems like, every single week. Really, I mean, one of his only bad games was that snow game, where it was, obviously difficult for him to do anything, or for that matter, any of the players. Russell Wilson didn't have a great game that night either, but it's very close. It's very close.
Not beating this to death here. And tell me, because I'm looking literally at a specific team. So if these numbers are off, I'm looking in a specific league, I should say. And I know scoring is different everywhere. So if these numbers feel wildly off, just tell me. Looking at Caleb from the last 3 weeks, and I pull out the last 3 weeks because that's since Shane Waldron left us. So against Green Bay, 16 points. And then the next week against Minnesota, almost 30, 29-9.
Yep.
And then against Detroit, 26. Like, that's a tough stretch. I mean,
but also keep
NFC
in mind,
North stretch right there.
Yeah. Remember what I had said earlier in the week, though, or maybe it was last week, the majority of his points are coming in the second half because they've been behind. And I don't think that they're going to be in a negative game script against San Francisco, because I don't think the Niners are that great.
That's true. But then, they do have those teams again.
And I think the Browns, even though they did beat the Steelers, will potentially be in a negative game script in Pittsburgh.
All right. All righty, good sir. Let's go to the running backs now. We obviously already told you Isaac Rendo is the guy that you are spamming all of your leagues. You are trying to get Isaac Rendo. So after that,
everywhere. Yeah, it's thin, kids. I mean, Tank Bigsby is out there. Kamani Vidal Sassoon is out there for the Lightning Bolts. Braylon Allen, because we don't know exactly the health of Breece Hall. He didn't look great this past week.
And the Jets actually have a pretty good schedule, fantasy playoff schedule for running backs.
Even for this week. I mean, the Dolphins are not great against the run. So Braylon Allen is somebody to grab. I don't know what the situation is going to be in Las Vegas because Alexander Madison maybe is going to be back this week. I don't know. But you could always look to see if Sincere McCormick is out there. I'm guaranteeing you he probably is.
Is that a real person?
Lindsay, there are 6 teams on a bye coming up. And if Madison and Zamir White are both out again, he's getting some touches.
Are you being sincere with this suggestion?
It is sincerely a desperate play.
Oh my God.
But yeah, he's definitely at least on the radar as a little blip on the radar.
That is the biggest example of like, hey, there's this guy, Grindo, and then way down here is the next guy. And then, Bigsby and Kamani Vidal and Braylon, like they feel like speculative ads. Like you were, grabbing them. Either you're 100% desperation and they might see the field and you're like, that's good enough. Or you are just grabbing them, holding on to them and waiting to see. And that's a very different situation than Grindo. Wide receivers, who are we looking at?
And Nick Westbrook-Akina, excuse me, is somewhat of the golden goose there.
Yeah.
At wide receiver, there are some pretty good options, but listen to this.
Yeah.
He has found the end zone in 7 of his last 8 games. And he's still available like everywhere.
I know. And by the way, like on a very limited number of catches. Like that was the stat of Red Zone and then also my social media feeds, everybody. I was like, gee, this has become like, did you know Clayton Kershaw and Matthew Stafford went to high school together? Like that day, I was like, no, move on. I know he scores a lot of touchdowns.
It's insane. And they got the Jaguars this week. So, I mean, not only is he lighting it up, but he's got a really good matchup. So, Westbrook-Akina is the number 1 ad at wide receiver. Adam Thielen is also up there after a big game for the Panthers. Now he's got the Eagles this week, but you could see a negative game script. Although who knows? The Panthers, the last couple of weeks have been playing really well. Yeah. But, we're going to find out how well they're playing because I would argue that the Eagles are a better team than the Buccaneers and the Chiefs. Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Way better than the Buccaneers. Sorry, you threw the Chiefs in there like when I was already co-signing.
Right. The Eagles are playing better football than the Chiefs right now. I mean, that's not even an argument.
But the Chiefs are still going to win the Super Bowl. So you just have to add that asterisk.
Just barfed in my mouth a little bit. Marquez Valdez-Scantling has, I know it's the NFL, the script writers. MVS is still out there in a lot of leagues. Go pick him up. They got the Giants this week. Parker Washington had a huge game for the Jaguars. Yeah. Tennessee coming up. The problem with him is Mac Jones, but he did most of his damage when Mac Jones was the quarterback. So I don't know what to make of that, but he's definitely on the radar. Keon Coleman, who did not come back for the Bills last week, I got to assume he's close to coming back. And so he could be a player that you can go out there and potentially stash. If you want to look at some other players at wide receiver, go a little bit deeper. Lindsay's boy, Kavonte Turpin, Ray McLeod.
He is my
Trey
boy.
Tucker, Brandon Cooks, guys like that are out there too.
Can I just tell you something super random here? And that is that when I was playing around fun with stats yesterday, my session of just like going through things and seeing what pops, one of the things that popped was that Mac Jones, in terms of advanced stats, EPA, that kind of stuff, was pretty high. In week 13, he had the third highest EPA per dropback for quarterbacks after only Josh Allen and Jordan Love. I mean, take that for what it's worth, right? Like it's Mac Jones. I think it's the Jaguars.
Outlier. So
right. I'm just saying, I mean, but actually, like when I was looking, like, month long and season long, because the season long, if you've only played for 2 or 3 games, it's still going to put your averages in that list. Like he was pretty high on various lists. In a way where I was like, what are we doing here? Why is Mac there? What kind of mistake did someone make? So there is that, I guess. He was much higher than Trevor Lawrence. I'll say that. Parker Washington's kind of interesting to me just because of the number of injuries there and the fact that I anticipate that they will be down and throwing and don't have very many people to throw to. And so, although I've seen that movie before. I picked up Parker Washington and immediately had to cut him because like nothing happened with it.
Yeah.
And so am I going to use fob on Parker Washington 2 times in one season. I don't think I can. I think just as a matter of principle, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So we'll
Well,
see.
But he will be added this week, and he will be started in some leagues.
What about tight ends?
Tucker Kraft, I was surprised how available he is. It's not like, he's 100% available in a lot of leagues, but, when I looked at the numbers, 59% ownership on ESPN, 63 on Sleeper, 59 on Yahoo. So under 40% in 2 of the 3 big platforms. So I threw him in there, although I don't like the matchup on Thursday night against Detroit. Mm-hmm. Pat Freiermuth has had 3 good games in a row, including 2 that were really good. He had almost 19 points last week. He's got the Browns this week. Noah Gray. I know Noah Gray didn't score a touchdown last week, but he's still involved in the offense. And they've got the Chargers on Sunday night. He will be starting in some leagues with all of these teams off. Dawson Knox, obviously all dependent on Dalton Kincaid's status. And Juwan Johnson against the Giants. Now, the Giants have been tough on tight ends, but no Taysom Hill. And, we know Chris Olave is banged up, and who knows if and when he's going to be back. So the Saints are very thin in terms of their pass catching options. So Juwan Johnson could be a desperation starter for some fantasy managers this week.